Hello, and welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to make their way into the creative industries. My name is Amelia Sciandra. I'm the other Amelia, the American Amelia. And you might be listening and thinking, my heart is breaking into a million little pieces because I don't hear the voice of my friend, my confidant, Dan Allen. But here's the great news. Our guest this week on the podcast, award-winning filmmaker, Dan Allen. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And panic over for the listeners. I know that must have been a tense couple of minutes, but also an exciting couple of minutes because that was beautiful. I think that intro looks good on you, Amelia.
Thank you. I enjoyed getting to say it after listening to it so many times. I think it was an honor really to utter those words. So we've got Dan here as the guest on the podcast for a very special spooky episode.
Very spooky.
On Halloween horror. Well, not really on Halloween. I suppose we should say on horror.
Yeah,
in honor of Halloween.
I'm trying to see if there's like anything in my room that I can make like some spooky noises with to like set some ambience.
That's just my mouth.
maybe you could just, whenever I answer a question, you could just do some of that.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'll just do like this low level. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And before every answer, you need to do like an evil laugh. Like a vampire.
Yeah.
That sounds like an old man.
But that was like a creepy old man, like vampire old man.
Okay.
Was that good? I was trying to make it a little bit interesting and unique because the alternative is the Voldemort laugh.
Yes.
You know the Voldemort laugh?
Yeah.
Do you want to have a go?
No, I can't do it. But if you can do it, I want to hear you do it.
I don't know if I can. Harry Potter is dead.
Excellent. That was really brilliant. So we've got you here because we thought as a Halloween special we would talk about horror films, and you are a maestro of horror films. So I think this is a great conversation because I hate horror movies. So your job in this next little bit is to convince me that I'm wrong, or to convince me to watch some of them. And actually, I shouldn't say I hate them. I should say I'm a big old scaredy cat. I can't handle the experience of many horror films. And maybe we'll get into a little bit of why. But why don't we start? My first question really, therefore, is why do you love horror movies?
That is a good question. Sorry, just what you were saying about how like you were saying you don't like them, but then you were saying actually it's because you're a scaredy cat. It reminded me of being a teenager, when there'd always be like some kids that are like, I don't like horror films, I just find them funny. It's like, I don't think that's true, is it? I think you're just like, you're lying.
Yeah.
Because you can't sit there and watch The Ring with the sound on at night. But yeah, sorry, that was a diverge. Why? What made me like them? Was that the question?
Well, the question is, why do you love them?
That's a good start.
Why do
I love them? I think the short answer is because they're immersive. So my earliest horror experience, I'm going to name two films that probably wouldn't even be on lists of horror films. And the first is Jurassic Park, and the second is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And
you've got a long way to go to convince me that these are horror films for you.
Well, straight off the bat, they definitely employ horror. I mean, you could argue Jurassic Park is a horror film in terms of, it's a monster movie with lots of monsters and stuff, and it's very much there's a few different types of movies, and that is a oh my god, I forgot the type. It's like a Theseus and a Minotaur type thing. It's when you're monster in the house.
Yes.
So you're trapped within an enclosure, whatever that enclosure is, and you're trapped there with a monster. So they're trapped in a theme park with dinosaurs.
Right.
I mean, that's just a cool setup anyway.
Absolutely.
And that genre is generally considered to be horror. Then you've got Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is like the main cinematic experience I remember as a kid. and there's a bit on I think it's like a watchtower or something, and Frodo and the gang are attacked by the ring wraiths.
Oh, I know exactly the part you mean.
You know, it's just before Aragorn turns up and like waves some fire, and he's like, "Go back, go back," you know, and they are just so scary. And I think Frodo puts on the ring, and it just makes it even scarier. And I remember feeling like the bass in the chair. It was the first time I noticed like sound and like low end.
Yes,
I think it's why I've always been obsessed with low end in sound, is like because of that scene. And it was terrifying. It was literally like the nightmares I'd had before, but this time I was awake and I was sitting in a cinema chair, and it was horrendous. And it's that relief of when it's over, and just that having such a profound effect. Whereas some films, you know, you can watch and you'd be like, yeah, no, it'd be nice if they got together at the end. You know, maybe okay, maybe I don't. But if you can truly terrify someone, that's so all encompassing and just plays with your senses so much that I just see that as such an effective way of telling a story, whatever that story is.
Absolutely. It's so interesting that you say that, actually, because I thought when you said Lord of the Rings, of course, my first response was, you're joking. But then I remembered that I actually was so afraid of the part where they're hiding from the ring wraiths on the path, and the ring wraith kind of leans over, and when he puts his hand on the ground, all the bugs start crawling out. That always stuck with me. And so I totally hear you that could be a kind of horror moment that inspired you. So funnily enough, you kind of answered my next question, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about how they influenced you, because I wanted to know what first, maybe more generic, I would say, horror movies you saw that really influenced you to think about making a horror movie.
In terms of like which actual horror film, sorry?
Yeah, or just what about what elements did you take into making your first horror movie that you saw, that you were trying to emulate?
Ooh, that's a good question. The first horror film I made oh, you could argue actually my first serious film was a horror film, actually. It was a film called End. I think it's still online. I think I made it when I was like 14 or 15. And the biggest influence on that maybe was actually like Doctor Who. Yeah, so I'm sort of coming at horror from a very soft approach. Do you know what I mean? Like I wasn't going to sleep watching sort of Friday the 13th from like a really young age. That sort of wasn't my journey. I think it started more gentle and horror in wider worlds. So, both Jurassic Park and Lord of the Rings and Doctor Who all have those light moments and those fun characters. There's always some sort of wider world. I love world building, essentially. And so the film I made was, I guess an alien invasion would be the simplest way of putting it, where suddenly everyone's parents have like disappeared instantly.
That sounds interesting.
Right, so it's only like young people left, and it's them figuring out what to do. These two young people, which was yeah, I think we shot it over like 3 days. I used one of these adapter things. So before the era of digital SLRs with like the lenses, if you wanted interchangeable lenses, you had to buy like a video camera and then buy this adapter that let you essentially film some glass that the lens was sort of projecting its image onto. It was all a bit of a difficult technical time.
Yeah.
So the whole film is a little bit blurry.
Interesting.
and it won an award, funnily enough. And I remember speaking to them after speaking to like the festival people. It was the first award I won, and it was like the first serious film I made. I'd made a lot of stuff that I like, it was very experimental to say the least, and including remakes of random stuff like from Harry Potter to Doctor Who, and first serious film, won an award. I asked them what they liked about it, and they were like, well, we just loved, the visual style was great. How it was all quite soft and sort of drifting out of focus.
So you could pretend that was a purposeful choice.
Yeah, I was like, oh, yeah, no, it's pretty cool, right? Secretly being right. I absolutely did not intend it to be so blurry. But no, it had a really nice tone to it, actually. So maybe that's but definitely I'd say Doctor Who was sort of one of the bigger influences on that. And also, I know what was also an influence on it. There's a bit where like there's a figure that comes up on the TV. So there's a little bit of a film called White Noise, which I don't know if you've seen White Noise, but that was terrifying, certainly as a kid. That's the one about EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. The idea that through electric equipment you can capture ghosts.
Interesting.
And this dude is trying to connect with his maybe dead wife, but there's these like evil spirits that are trying to come through. It's really weird, right? Because I remember that as a kid, and I remember it really viscerally. So I remember it as like one of the classiest horror films I've ever seen. And I'm sort of scared / really intrigued to go back and rewatch it and be like, oh, no. It was just sort of like a standard run-of-the-mill horror film.
Sure. Well, and I'm old enough that when you said person on the TV, I am taken back to one of the reasons why I don't like horror movies, which is Poltergeist, which I saw when I was way too young. And I slept with the lights on for 2 weeks, and I didn't watch TV for like a month because I was very afraid that I was going to, like the little girl in Poltergeist, get sucked into the TV. So
yeah, that's a classic as well.
Yeah,
I do like Poltergeist. Yeah, everything's referential. I'm referencing the film that was referencing the film. I think it's because I saw Poltergeist much later.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that kind of leads me to something I thought we could talk about that might be interesting. To talk about sort of genre within horror, because there are, as you've already kind of mentioned by mentioning, movies that people don't necessarily typify or classify as horror, and as a person who doesn't like horror, I can sort of articulate for you those ones that I don't like and the ones that so I always say to people when they ask me, oh, you don't like horror movies? I say, no, I like thrillers. And I've realized that the truth is what I don't like is jump scares. And I don't like horror films that are predicated on jump scares. So, for example, I really want to see A Quiet Place because I love John Krasinski and I love Emily Blunt and I know that it's probably a good film. But the whole premise of that movie is jump scares. So why would I watch it?
Anticipation for jump scares,
exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you've got thrillers, you've got gore, you've got, I was thinking of horror comedies like Shaun of the Dead. So talk a little bit about, if you can, like the genre of horror and like, how you see it, which, is certainly just perhaps your opinion, but what your experience of that is.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's a big question. Yeah. So maybe we can start with jump scares, actually, because jump scares are interesting, and then we can look at the sort of the different subgenres, because it's such a big umbrella.
Yes.
And everyone always says horror has like such a big fan base, and it really does. But then there's like sub fan bases within that fan base that some really love sort of the ghost stuff, some really love the sort of slasher gore stuff. Yes. And we can sort of explore what all those are as well. Jump scares are really interesting because I feel like jump scares just go in and out of fashion.
Interesting.
And I think I don't know if it's led by the filmmakers or it's led by the critics, but I know certainly there's waves of films being like, oh, there's just too many jump scares, it doesn't actually try and build suspense and stuff like that. And then there's a passage of films getting praised for having no jump scares in it. It's like, wow, it's so scary and it didn't even have any jump scares. Isn't that really interesting as an art piece? And then what happens is then everyone removes the jump scares, and then I think what happens is films actually become significantly less scary, because it's not like it needs the jump scares. You just need to think that the jump scares are going to happen.
Right.
If you don't think the jump scares are going to happen, then what are you really be anticipating. And you could say something spooky, but no, I think you're really scared of the bang, right? Hitchcock always said, like, you know, it's not the bang, it's the anticipation of it. But then suddenly, if you get into a rhythm where there's no jump scares in horror films, then I think you're just not going to be that fearful of watching them.
Right.
And I think you do need some, and I think you especially need some early on in your film, just to say it could happen,
right?
But will it? Oh, I don't know, maybe. And sort of having that is helpful. So I like them. Mm-hmm. I think they're really good. I think certainly the criticism's fair when you over rely on jump scares, and certainly when they're lazy,
right?
So it's really weird. So I had a really weird. I don't really like sort of smack talking films because I think there's so many meritable qualities to films. But I had a really interesting, bizarre experience with. There's a film called The Curse of La Llorona, which it only came out a couple of years ago. There's a sequence. They showed a trailer for that film in the cinema, and it was like a 3-minute sequence or so. It literally just one sequence as part of the trailer is how it felt, of this kid that knows that La Llorona, which is like this witchy dead demon thing, is somewhere outside this car. This kid is just alone in the car, and he's not, and it's night, so you can't really see beyond the windows, but he knows that she's somewhere outside the vehicle,
right?
And the car, like the door locks keep popping up.
Ooh.
So he's having to like run over and then like lock the car door, and then like suddenly the one behind him will open and he's got to run over there, and then suddenly like the window starts going down, and it's literally one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. Like I was literally just like, holy moly, that was phenomenal horror filmmaking.
Yeah.
And you know, you're waiting for the bit where I'm pretty sure eventually it's just like, boom, she's in the window. It's like, well, you know, you knew that was going to happen, but what an amazing suspenseful sequence.
Yeah.
But then I watched the film. That scene, for some reason, was only a minute long and cut down, and didn't really have any effect. And then instead, what I got with the film was there's just quite a few like weird jump scares where it's like, oh, where is La Llorona? She's in the wardrobe. I was like, why is she in the wardrobe? Like I know it's a horror film, but why is she in the wardrobe?
Right.
What was she doing in there? Like she was just hoping that someone might open the door and then she can go, it's me, I'm in the, you got me, or is in the wardrobe. What are you doing in the wardrobe? Seriously, like, I feel like villains have to have an agenda. Trying to get into the car, really cool agenda. Right. Hiding in a wardrobe so you can go boo. I think that felt like a lazy jump scare, and it didn't make sense to me compared to the scene I saw, and I wonder if there was some sort of studio interference on that film, maybe.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think you're so right. I think probably what I don't like are films with unearned jump scares, films that just rely on jump scares to be the only thing that is the thing of the film, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think about a movie that I love that I would consider a horror film, but I don't know if other people do, or maybe it falls under the umbrella of horror, but in one of these subgenres that you're talking about. But it's The Others with Nicole Kidman. That is
one of the first horror films I remember is still one of the scariest I've ever seen.
So scary. That movie is terrifying, and it does so much of that. I think there's like 2 jump scares in the whole film, and it's just environmental world building.
12.
World building.
It's a 12.
Yeah, it's a 12, and it's terrifying.
What?
And
that doesn't make sense.
And I think that's the kind of movie I want to watch. I've realized I like a psychological thriller. I want you to mess with my brain, but I don't want you to take my adrenaline levels all over the place for no reason. I think it's interesting because I always think I'm an adrenaline junkie. I love roller coasters, but I love a roller coaster because you know what's coming. You've seen it. You know the shape. Yeah. You're like, oh, here we go. We're going to go upside down now. Whereas in a horror film with jump scares, you don't know when they're coming, and if they're unearned, if they're random, like witch popping out of wardrobe, then it's for no reason. Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, you were, yeah, absolutely. You want it to feel earned. You want the narrative to really carry those scares as well. And The Others is such a good example. There are some like just phenomenal scary sequences in that.
Absolutely.
That I don't even know if they end in bangs and stuff, but like they keep you hooked, you know.
Right. Yeah, and I it's interesting that you said that, whether they end in bangs. I think that's something also I just personally, I think I like a jump scare where it's a visual jump scare rather than necessarily a sound jump scare, because that's what really sort of, I'm a very oral person, and I guess that really bothers me. But when it's an image, I'm like, oh, this was clever. This was really well done.
Yeah, 100%. No, definitely. Yeah, Others is fantastic, and that uses the visual jump scares. I always remember there's if you haven't seen the Others, guys, you should definitely check it out if you like horror. There's that scene where it's the old woman under the veil.
Yes.
Do you remember that? Like, that still haunts me.
Yeah, I probably haven't seen that movie in 15, maybe even 20 years, but I still think about parts of the film that bother me. So for sure, it really sticks with you. Before we move into sort of talking about subgenre, I think it bears talking about, when we're talking about jump scares, music and sort of the use of music in horror films. Because I'm always thinking, what tells you a jump scare? The music often tells you a jump scare is coming. And then sometimes cleverly they don't give you one because they're messing with you But what do you think about the use of music in horror films? How do you see that?
Yeah, it's something actually I advise people when people ask me for like guidance with their own horror films. Is there's a misunderstanding of music in horror films, because I think everyone always says quite rightly, it's the music that makes horror films. Right. It's the music that makes it scary. The music certainly does. In the same way it makes all films, it tells you this is scary, it tells you this is suspenseful, it sets the tone and the energy for the scene and stuff. But then what you end up seeing in sort of people that are maybe new to the genre that are trying to make horror films is creepy music like playing throughout the whole scene.
Right.
And then suddenly there's like a bang, and you're like, it's really the absence of music and the absence of sound that really puts the audience on edge.
Totally.
So by all means, start your scene with some music. But then if you really want the audience to sit up in their chairs and be really nervous, take all the music away. Have it suddenly end. The moment that silence is created, you create a vacuum that you then, the audience knows, like, oh my God, something's going to happen here, and you don't know where it is, and you might hear some like squeaking floorboards. It's like, what's going to happen? It's the silence that makes you go, ooh, maybe is it going to happen now? Is it going to happen now? So you don't want to really have a jump scare breakthrough music. You want to have a jump scare breakthrough silence. So use this music to transition, and then surely after that jump scare, then maybe you're going to have like a I don't know. Maybe it launches into an action scene. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Right.
But music is like key. I think you find it more in sort of transitions in horror films than you do for the suspense scene. So yes, it's key, and there's been some amazing music scores for horror films. I think some really memorable ones.
Absolutely, yeah.
Halloween,
of course, yeah.
It's obviously a really well-known
Jaws.
One. Jaws, absolutely. The Exorcist. All these ones with cracking scores. And if we count Jurassic Park, then obviously that's a phenomenal score.
100%.
But that that maybe does feel like less of a horror movie score,
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's always interesting. I love, one of my favorite things that I see in films that I have seen in the very few horror films I've watched is that use of diegetic music that then gets turned off. That is just such a clever thing for, them. They're listening to the radio and then they turn the radio off, and you just have this, silence that is, then you're in the moment with them, and then you have that evocative feeling that you're talking about, that immersive feeling of being left quiet.
Yeah. Oh my God! Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they do it. They do it with either diegetic or non-diegetic sound. Like both of those work together to create that vacuum. As you're saying, radio could switch off. Sometimes it's as simple as like there's been like a really gentle wind blowing, and then suddenly the wind stops.
Yes,
and you might not even pick up
that's
on what's just stopped.
Right.
But you know that silence is now prevalent and you are uncomfortable. And there's loads of sort of tricks like that just to say, be on edge. So definitely, if you're interested in making horror films, you should go and watch them, and maybe see if you can download a scary sequence, a sequence that you find scary, put it into an editing program, have a look at the shots, really sort of scrub through it slowly. When does the music stop? What is the sound doing at each beat? And how long does it wait before it jump scares you?
Yeah. It's a really interesting thing that you're talking about here, because my background is in theater. And as a theater director, I think a lot about the use of silence as well and what silence does for us. And so it's just such an interesting thing that, you're right. So much, even as a sort of Luddite in terms of horror, I think about how much the music matters. But you're right. Now in reflection, it's the silence. So much of the others is silent. There's very little going on. And I remember that you're so right. When there's no sound and then you hear a step on a creaky floorboard, that's when my adrenaline is through the roof, and I'm freaking out. So it's definitely powerful.
No, definitely. Whereas you want to let those scary moments be scary. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure I've made this mistake before, but film is about making mistakes in it. And I want to make sure you guys don't make the mistakes.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about.
Kill your music.
Let's talk a little bit about if we've got young people thinking of making films and thinking, I want to make a horror film. But horror, as we said, is this sort of umbrella term, and there are all these sort of subgenres within horror. And I always think about. I think you mentioned it actually at the beginning, and it was so funny. All the things you were talking about at the beginning, I was like, oh, we got to put a pin in that and come back to it, because my response when I watch horror films, the way that I deal with how frightened I am is to laugh. And I'll never forget the experience I had in the cinema seeing Jennifer's Body. And I believe that Jennifer's Body is a horror comedy. Now, I might be in the minority, but I laughed my butt off. I thought it was hilarious. And that was definitely sort of a defense mechanism, but also I just thought it was really funny. And people in the cinema were turning around and shushing me for laughing. And I was like, I'm sorry, this is how I deal. And also this is hilarious.
Yeah.
So
it's like second to having a baby in the screening is having Amelia in a horror film.
Yeah, you do not want to see it. Because the other thing is nowadays, if I watch a horror film, I have to watch it at home with the lights on during the day, with a blanket on my head so that I can cover my eyes when I need to. So I'm very much
sound off. Sound off is a good technique as well, which doesn't really feel like watching a film, but that's what I used to do with my mum as a kid. That's how I watched The Ring.
Interesting.
When I was a kid. Yeah, it was sound off, lights on.
I watched The Ring through a blanket with holes in it, and still have nightmares about that girl. So let's talk about. So Jennifer's Body, for example. If we're putting this into a subgenre, what do you reckon? Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it.
I've been told to watch it so many times. I know. I don't know. What is that? A social commentary?
Well, it's definitely
film?
Social commentary. There's a lot of gore. She eats these guys. So let's talk about gore.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about slasher gore films.
For sure. Yeah. So I mean, that's sort of its own world, really. Slasher movies generally have a series of murders that takes place throughout the film. So much so that if you make a slasher film now, and I've technically made slasher movies, or certainly edited slasher movies, there's an expectation that a certain number of people are going to die. In fact, you often can get notes from the distributor and be like, we'll buy this film as long as there's 10 deaths in it.
Wow.
They want to know. It's called the kill count.
Kill count,
in
right.
fact, there's probably even a website called killcount.com or something like that. I haven't been on one, but I bet that exists.
I'm sure. A database.
Yeah, I was letting you know how many people die in each film. But that's a key part, and generally it's maybe a bit up in the air who might be the final person. It's normally a girl, because you've got a survivor girl as a trope within that genre, and they're generally maybe the more morally righteous one. Also, there's often been sins that have been committed that mean that these people maybe deserve to die because they've been a bit bad, certainly in the eyes of God. Even if it's not a religious movie, there's actually a really spiritual connotation to all horror film, because it's in in a way not like many other genres. It's the most good and evil type of storytelling that you will get.
Sure. And the murders are about atonement of those sins.
Yeah, absolutely. So many films, like even thrillers, are sort of very grey, and it's very human. It's humans versus humans, and you sort of understand why they're doing things. Whereas often, this is like evil spirits, or it's like evil people. It's people that have gone wrong that are now murdering. So it's the closer to sort of traditional storytelling that you can get, I think, in a way. And certainly with the slasher, that's it sort of in its purest sense. It's just, it's just surviving. It's one after the other, people die. And you're generally in sort of a specific area or location and stuff. And it's normally teenagers. Because a lot of teenagers watch horror films, which, that applies to lots of genres. The age of the characters in the film is generally the age of the audience they're trying to get. It doesn't always apply. Like Marvel is meant to appeal to wider audiences, and some of their characters are like 30s, 40s, 50s. There's some younger ones. They're trying to certainly do younger ones now with like the Young Avengers and stuff. But certainly in sort of horror, the target audience is generally the age of the protagonist, as it were.
Yeah, it makes me. I'm reminded that when I was in university, we did a show called Final Girl, which was inspired by all of inspired by all of the final girls in horror films who are the last ones to be killed, because we were
a great show idea.
We were learning that was something that is typified horror films, especially slasher films. So, okay, great. So that's gore. We've got that. You're on a killing spree and you're probably getting killed because you're bad.
Absolutely.
What about horror comedy? What do you have familiarity with this genre? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting genre because there's far more crossover than people would ever think. Mm-hmm. The micro beats of a horror are the same as the micro beats of a comedy.
Right.
In that it's often there's negative forces and good prevails in comedy. They're also slightly more black and white as stories, just like horrors, as I was saying. Mm-hmm. But then also on top of that, the way scenes unfold is the same. There's not much difference between creating comedy and creating horror. They both rely on setup, suspense, and payoff. Mm-hmm. So those are your 3 Bs. So you're setting something up, you have suspense, and then it's broken either by a scary thing or a joke, which is why that sort of genre works really well. And what you'll see horror comedies do is they'll constantly replace jump scares with punchlines.
Yes.
And that really illustrates quite how similar they are. And they're similar even if it's not in a horror comedy. Like, take a horror film and take a comedy, and really, like, you can imagine silly things happening in the horror in the horror, and then I'm sure you can imagine scary things happening in the comedy. But certainly, like, the structure of it, you've got suspense sequence or scary sequences versus funny sequences, and that's sort of your ammunition for the film as well. But how you construct scenes and also how you construct the films is very similar. But I'm a big fan. I'm a massive fan of like Scary Movie 3 in particular. But I really loved the scary movies growing up.
Yes.
In fact, that then made me Google which films that they were sort of copying, and then I would go and watch those horror films.
Right.
So it was like it was almost like a greatest hits thing.
Yeah.
Where I could actually find movies through the genre of horror comedy, through the spoof. I mean, that's a spoof actually, so that's an even more specific subgenre.
Yes.
Whereas, I mean, I guess in a way, horror comedy is often a spoof. It's like Shaun of the Dead, you could argue, is a spoof of zombie films, but it's very much its own film compared to Scary Movie, which is entirely dependent on these other films.
Knowing these other films, and certainly, yes, making fun of them, or not making fun of them, really parodying them and almost paying homage to them. It's an interesting kind of, if you don't know a lot about horror movies and you want to ease your way in, watch Scary Movie and then look up all the movies that they're, making fun of or whatever. A really interesting kind of way in there.
There's so many good bits, like
yeah.
Definitely Scary Movie 3 is the best. Watch that one.
Yeah. I was thinking, okay, so we've got kind of horror comedy, we've got gore, we've got thrillers. Let's talk about thrillers, because I think this is a difficult kind of one to define almost. And what do you see thrillers as? And do you even classify them as horror?
Not really.
So you're really...
I think people that don't watch horror films classify them as horror films. I think
you're calling me out right here, Dan, and I don't appreciate it.
Not you specifically, but the amount of times I've been at parties and I'll be like, oh, I work on horror films, and people be like, oh yeah, no, I really like thrillers, and I'm like, no. But I think there is similarity in the experience, right. And I do understand why there is perceived crossover. Because psychological thrillers in particular, right, are these, you're going into this world that's confusing. So they still have an Alice in Wonderland quality to them, right. Which a lot of horror films do, and certainly a lot of ghost horror films. So I think there is actually a lot of crossover, and I think horror filmmakers will tell really good thrillers and vice versa. But I think the audience is often quite different. I don't know. I'm trying to think of examples of sort of psychological horror. So there's something that's like more specifically a horror film.
I would perhaps consider Saw psychological horror.
Yeah, but that is also that is just a gore fest, isn't it, as well?
True.
I wonder if you sort of, you know what, maybe the first Saw.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I mean. The first one is quite psychological.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that film, certainly it's like, what would you do? And that's sort of what a lot of thrillers, they ask the question of what would you do quite a lot. So I think there definitely is crossover. I would say often there's maybe less crossover with a thriller and a horror than there is with a comedy and a horror, even though they're tonally further apart. But yeah, no, they I'm trying to think, there must be ones where people I'm trying to think of an example where someone's hallucinating and you're not sure what's real. You could argue that, Black Swan is sort of a horror thriller in a way.
Yeah. There's that movie they made. I never saw it because, again, I'm a big baby, but it has Elizabeth Moss, and she's sort of unsure whether her doctor is helping her or not helping her. And she's good. In a mental hospital. That probably would fall under that category.
For sure. Yeah, no, definitely.
So what other, as a person who doesn't watch horror movies, what other kind of so thrillers aren't horrors, Dan's told us, and I'm a big baby, and what he's saying is that people who watch thrillers and call them horrors are big babies. We get it. It's me. But as a person who doesn't like horror movies, therefore, what genres am I missing? What other kind of subcategories do they make horror films into?
Yeah, so obviously you got the monster films,
right?
Are big ones. That there's often crossover with slashers. There's often a monster that's picking people off one by one. But generally, slasher has got someone with a weapon,
right? It's a
versus
person,
monster films. Yeah, absolutely. Then you've got your ghost ones, your ghost films, which is quite a big genre that never seems to go away very often. That there's always sort of ghost films being made, just supernatural, I guess, right. is what we'd call that. So supernatural horrors is a big one, and there's been some great sort of work in that field recently. Ari Aster, who also did another type of horror film, who did the good old folk horror. Scared of countryside people.
Yes.
Or just, it's fear of remote way of living or a way of living life and society that's different. And that you only get a new folk horror once every now and then.
Sure.
They never stick for some reason. I don't know why you don't suddenly get loads, but there's been some fantastic ones. Like the Kill List is also a really cool folk horror. That also is a suspense thriller hitman movie. It's very cool. But and then obviously the Wicker Man and stuff. But I don't know, Midsummer.
I was going to say Midsummer is the perfect example, right, of the new folk horror movie. New It.
Yeah, but then there hasn't. Do you know what I mean? Where I say that did well, I think.
Yeah.
Where are all the other ones?
Right.
No one ever follows them up. Whereas normally there's like one scary ghost film, and then people are like, oh, ghosts.
Yeah. Now, when you say supernatural, would you consider? I'm thinking of those films that, of course, I've never seen any of them. But the thing is, I remember all the horror films because I watched the trailers, and I'm afraid of even the trailers, and so they stick with me.
Yeah.
Paranormal Activity. Is this a ghost movie, or is this another genre even in of itself?
Oh, well, it's two genres, that one. So that's definitely a supernatural horror film, but there's also a found footage.
I was going to say found footage must be, the classic being Blair Witch Project, obviously.
Blair Witch Project was like the OG. Recently, Rob Savage did a film called Host, which is amazing, which is all set on Zoom.
Wow.
In fact, that got ranked recently as scariest film of all time based on heart rate.
Wow.
So
that's so cool.
You should check it out. It's only 50 minutes as well, so you should watch it on your laptop and for the proper experience.
Now, Dan, I think you'll appreciate this. During the pandemic, I produced a few Zoom festivals for theater. And one of the best plays that we did in one of the festivals was a horror play on Zoom where someone kept showing up in the background that they never talked about, and everybody said that play was so good, it was so interesting, what a cool use of Zoom. So that playwright was thinking along the same lines as this guy. It's really interesting.
That is pretty cool. It's a great sort of new medium that popped up, really. The sort of I know there had been a couple of like FaceTime horror films, actually.
Right.
People are always sort of trying to find those sort of new ways of doing found footage. There's lots of sort of video cameras, which is like the Blair Witch way, but then just taking new media. There was one that was purely on a desktop, and then Zoom is sort of a hybrid because it's like lots of people's phones and computers and stuff.
Sure. Really cool.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah, so found footage is its own beast that then obviously, because you often find some of these pair up,
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, trying to typify something into genre is always difficult because things really do kind of blur the boundaries.
Yeah, 100%.
Are there any subgenres that we've missed?
Oh my God. The pressure's on that. I'm looking around my room for like inspiration. We haven't really mentioned like werewolves and vampires and stuff.
Yes. Now, do you consider those horror?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Were they like gothic
horror? Sure.
So that maybe is its own genre. I'm not sure where people would put them. You could put that under supernatural. And then you've also got science fiction horror as well.
Right.
We haven't mentioned.
Yes.
So the Alien, great example of that.
Yeah.
I also I'm oddly a fan of Prometheus. I think it's like a weird film, but I just love all the sort of lore underneath, the world building. Again,
I love that movie, Dan. I'm so with you. I think the world building in that is brilliant. Would you consider that a sci-fi horror?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh wow!
100%.
So I have seen a horror movie. I'm so proud of myself.
There you go. Yeah. Well, that's the classic. You could argue that they're all of those are. Oh, what did I call them? Monster in the House movies. Yeah. Because you're normally trapped somewhere, whether that's a planet or a spaceship, and there's a creature on the loose, and you're having to escape it.
Yeah.
So they also fall into that category, but then also at the same time they are sci-fi horror.
Sure.
Which plays into is also what Black Mirror does, right? They also take
brilliant
bits of technology and then advance it to be like, okay, well, what would that look like if we took it to the nth degree, and how scary could it get? And then I suppose they answer that question.
Yeah, they answer that question with robot dogs that murder people, right?
I was literally thinking of the robot dogs.
The robot dogs are one of the scariest episodes. That episode's so scary. Now, what about I'm trying to think of scary movies that I saw when I was young, because certainly when I was a teenager, and this is an interesting perspective, I felt a lot of pressure from my friends to watch scary movies with them before I got brave enough to say, I'm not watching that movie because I want to sleep next week. So I did watch quite a few when I was a teenager. And how would you categorize, if you've ever seen the Final Destination films?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, Yeah, what will they come under as? Or are they a genre in themselves?
That's what I'm wondering. And I'm wondering, are there other films like those that we could sort of categorize all together if we were trying to?
Yeah, is that a psychological horror?
I suppose it is. I suppose it is a psychological horror because you sort of, I always think of it, right? The scene that a lot of people remember is the one where she's driving behind the truck on the highway with the logs, right? And the logs break off, and then it slams through her windshield, and she's done. So yeah, but it was funny because I wanted to bring that up because it's almost a slasher movie. But what's killing them is not a monster or a person, it's fate.
That's the thing. I'm literally Googling it to see what the internet's sort of written it down as. They've written it down as a final destination is a supernatural horror film.
Supernatural. Fate, I suppose, comes under supernatural.
Fate, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it definitely, it's got all the horror tropes, right? I mean, it's definitely a horror film. You've got the gore and stuff. Yeah, torture was its own genre as well for a while.
Right. Not a kind of film I want to watch personally.
No, but you've got like Hostel and stuff.
Oh, yes. I think that I did watch. I think I watched only the first one because, again, I was way too scared.
Yeah.
Well,
it's sort of, it's that's an even smaller sort of subset of the audience that love that stuff.
Sure. So, great. I mean, thanks. That I think was educational for me, and hopefully it was educational for anybody listening if they're unfamiliar, or even if they are familiar a bit with horror. And now I want to just sort of turn the lens and zoom in a bit on you. I'd love for you to tell us about your horror films that you've made.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What have I made?
Well, tell me about your most recent one where I literally couldn't even get through the trailer when we were sitting together to watch it.
This was It Came From Below. Yes. Yeah, this is even though the monster doesn't come from below, there's a twist. Actually, it's up in the air where it comes from. I can discuss if anyone watches it and wants to talk about where the monster comes from, then please let me know, because I think there's some exciting theories.
Ooh.
But that is I would say that is a sci-fi horror film. Other people might not agree, but it's also a monster in the house film in a way.
Right, it's set in a cave, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's set in a cave. And we filmed it for 14 days across 3 caves. There was some in Cheddar Gorge, Wookiee Hole it was called, and then we went up to there was like a wild cave called Yordis Cave, and that was pretty cool, but it was open to the public, so at one point there was a school bus of children that turned up, and we had like a monster. We had someone dressed up covered in blood.
Oh my gosh.
It's like a big scary monster. So it's like run down and be like, hey, like obviously we can't stop you coming up because everyone can visit this area, but just as a heads up. And these kids were like 6 or 7.
Oh no.
It was like, just as a heads up, we do have a monster, and then we've got an actress covered in blood, so
you caused some nightmares that night for sure.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, the kids, they had took a wide berth of us filming. And then there was another cave set that we had, Ingleborough, which was great. And we sort of merged all 3 and filmed, in real caves, which I wouldn't recommend doing because they're very, very wet. And
yes, I was just thinking, how did you keep everything? How did you keep all the kit dry?
We didn't.
Oh,
we didn't. We failed. We went through 3 monitors.
Oh, my Lord.
It was a nightmare. Yeah, so, I mean, no one packs a spare monitor because monitors are always fine. And on the shoot, we were shooting on the Red Epic, and the monitor at one point just cut out.
Oh,
and it's because I think it got splashed with some water. So we suddenly lost picture. But then the producer said, oh, it's okay. Don't worry. We've got this... We've got a spare monitor, and he goes and gets it, but it's like 20 inches. It's like really big.
Yeah.
Which isn't ideal. And we had no way of attaching it to the camera. So for the rest of the day, I had to hold this monitor next to the camera. And if you've ever sort of moved a camera, there's a reason the monitor is like attached to the camera, because it makes sense when you turn the lens, what you're doing on the picture. if the monitor is moving independently to the camera, it's really confusing what you're doing to get to sort of pan left and right.
Oh, gosh.
Suddenly you're like, it doesn't quite make sense because the monitor's also moving, so you then move to try and compensate the monitor's moving, and it's just all a disaster. And then what happened is the HDMI cable. Oh no, someone put a battery on the back of the monitor on incorrectly and broke the pin that the battery connects to.
No.
And then we lost that monitor. And suddenly we had no picture at all. And we literally had to send someone to for like a 3 or 4 hour drive, because we found this was like midnight on Sunday. We were like, how are we gonna? Oh, and it was also like pandemic lockdown, so nowhere was open that would sell us a monitor.
Oh no!
And nowhere was opening the next day either, because the shops were all shut, and nothing would arrive in time from Amazon. So we found on Fat Llama there was literally one person who was 3 hours away that had a monitor. And we said, like, could we rent the monitor? And he was like, yeah, sure. And we were like, cool, can we be there at 6 a.m.?
In the morning. Oh my gosh.
In the morning. And then we just didn't get a reply. And we were like, right, well, we got two options. We either wait for him to reply at 6, or we just turn up anyway.
Yeah.
And hope that he's still okay with us borrowing the monitor. So we literally, we sent someone without even having booked it. We sent them on this like huge drive to go to this person's place, and thankfully the dude was like, no, cool, and they sorted it out. But it was nerve-wracking, but it was the best option we had.
Oh my gosh!
And then that monitor for some reason would only display everything in a shade of green, so we had to shoot the rest of the film literally only looking at green images. We just had to trust that the histogram was fine. Yeah, so a bit of a nightmare. But it's a cool film. It's a nice little indie film, very small, like micro budget. But it's got some lovely sort of sequences and jump scares in there, which are good fun. And then I got a super short called The Mime, which did really well in festivals and online as well. And that's like if you can't do like the full 80 minutes of It Came From Below, this is like a 3-minute corker.
Ooh.
Which has got a great character that I'm expanding into a feature. Well, I've got the script, but I'm just waiting for people to, I'm waiting to find the right producers and people with money, as always.
Great. Yeah, as always, of course. Great. Brilliant. Those sound really exciting. So maybe this question, I don't know how you're going to feel about this question, but my question that I thought you might answer for our young listeners is, why make a horror movie? So what do you feel are potentially kind of lessons you can learn on a horror flick that you might be able to apply kind of widely if you think, I want to make a film, I have this idea, but maybe I don't want to become a horror filmmaker. What lessons could you learn from making a horror film?
As in this hypothetical scenario, someone is going to make one for the sake of making one, and they might take some stuff away. What would that stuff be?
Yes.
Yeah. Confidence in silence, I think, is key, because that can also be applied to drama. And as you were saying, it applies so much to theatre. Yeah. And I think actually being bold and strong with your filmmaking and being like, no, I want the audience to be in suspense here, and trusting that will happen, and giving yourself the opportunity to do something that does have that suspense and quietness, I think is really, maybe is confidence building. It gives you a chance to try something like that out and then see the effect it has on the audience,
Sure.
And also just the opportunity to try and make something scary, try and make your audience jump, try and follow the rules, try to use silence, try to set up suspense and payoff. It was one of the reasons I made this series called 3 Minute Horror, which is it's like 5 short films that literally most of them were shot in like places I lived or like on the street. And they'll literally be shot in like 3 or 4 hours with just, mostly it was me filming. I think my brother filmed a couple of them for me, but they're just self-shot, and they're all just suspense experiments, as it were. So I'd recommend just testing it out, and you might find that you love it,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm always struck by how often actors that I like, who typically are comedic actors or, dramatic actors, do horror films. So there's obviously something, and some people have said to me that I'll get over my fear of horror films if I just make one, if I'm just in one, or I try to make one. So maybe that's what I need to do, Dan, is have you cast me in your next horror film so I can get over being afraid of it. But I think you're so right that there's a level of experimentation you can have with a horror film that is worth sort of giving it a shot, especially if you're a young person.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing as well is they are so much fun to make because everything's slightly larger than life. You've got all this blood, maybe got like a monster and things are going boo and stuff, So the tone of set, at least from my experience, but this is also the kind of set I like running. And maybe that's a nice challenge for you as well, is to make a film that's genuinely scary. Make a film that's scary. Make a film that's genuinely scary and run a set that is really fun to be on and to be around, and people have a really good time. Because my experience has always been sort of laughing and smiling between takes.
Right.
Apart from one instance, but I mean, it was literally like minus degrees, and I think the actress was like soaking wet with mud.
God.
It was pretty horrendous.
Yeah.
She was fine, thankfully. But all the rest of the shoot, it was very nice and cozy, and caves are actually fairly warm, even though they're wet. So having fun with that, but then also making sure that you create the right tone of images that you want. Like, can you actually create something moody? Can you create the atmosphere that you want? Horror is so steeped in atmosphere that maybe is really enjoyable to try and create. It's the atmosphere is bigger than just the characters. The characters are going to help sell it, but it's all these other things. It's all the mise en scène that's going to contribute towards creating this atmosphere. Whereas sometimes when you're doing a drama, everything else is more of a backdrop rather than sort of like always necessarily feeding the atmosphere, because it's the performances and the character and the dialogue that are so paramount in like a key drama scene. It's like with horror, in a really important suspense scene, you're going to get cutaways of lots of creepy images.
Right.
Whereas in a really important drama scene, you're not going to get cutaways of the pots and pans.
No, you're just going to get extreme close-up of the actors or something like that.
Extreme close-up. Absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Well, I think that's great. And so now I want to ask you the question that I feel is very important to ask, which is, what would you tell young Dan, knowing what you know now?
The funny thing is, obviously, I ask this every week, and I don't know if I've ever stopped to ask myself. What would I tell young Dan? This answer would probably change every week or month. I would say try and enjoy yourself, which I have done. So, I mean, maybe then that's pointless advice. But I think enjoying the journey is really key. And I think that is, movies are cool.
Yeah.
They're really good fun. And it's amazing to live a life that affords you to make films and to tell stories. And I think sometimes you can get so caught up in the weeds. It's important to remember quite how cool it is,
Yeah.
Like, nothing against accountants, but you could be doing numbers all day. You know what I mean? And instead, it's like stories and ideas and stuff.
Right.
That's someone's idea of fun, but it's not mine.
Yeah. And
getting to do what I perceive to be fun, I think is super dope. And this is the other piece of advice, which I wish someone told me. Networking means make friends. I didn't realize this. This sounds dumb, but it's like, sometimes you get the talk about networking from from very people that are like, oh, yes, networking, yeah, make sure you exchange numbers and details and do this and do that, and make sure these connections, because these connections are going to be useful later. But like, all of that is nonsense.
Yeah.
And the reason I mean that is like, okay, what? You're going to exchange your number with someone that's exchanged their number with like 70 people. They don't care about you, really, sincerely, unless you've got a really good idea. You might get an opportunity to pitch something out of it. Maybe you'll make a connection, like a DOP and stuff. But really, especially even if that's that DOP, you're there to make friends. Who comes and helps you on your films? It's always your friends. It's not. It's not Jeff you met one time at like a film festival. Jeff doesn't care. Yeah. Quite frankly, you haven't seen Jeff for 3 years since that festival, but you met Billy, and you've been maybe going for a pint because you like his similar films and stuff like that, and maybe you're going to go to the cinema with Billy, and maybe there's some other film people, and you're going to hang out with them and stuff, and then Billy's like, oh, Dan, like, you know, I'm doing this film. Do you, you know, I don't suppose there's any way you can help out for the shoot for a couple of days? Yeah, no, of course, because we're friends and we hang out and stuff like that, and then next thing you know, Billy is working in development for such and such, and you're like, Billy, I've got something. Oh, yeah, no. Well, I work in development, don't I? And I know, that's why I'm calling you. And we care about each other, you know? So make sincere friends with people you actually like, and those contacts and those connections will carry you the furthest.
Absolutely. I think it's such a great piece of advice, because I think people struggle with the idea of networking because it seems on the surface very transactional, right? What do I have to give you, and what do you have to give me? But actually, if you really get down to what networking ought to be, it is about that building relationships and figuring out how the relationships will serve you on a personal level before you can discover how they might serve you on a professional level.
100%. And genuinely, I wish someone told me that, because I feel like the people that teach networking are the people that see it as transactional.
Right.
Generally. I don't know, or maybe I misinterpreted it. I misunderstood. Even though I'm quite loud, I'm actually an introvert. So it's sort of like, you know, there's always a confusing thing in my head which says, you know, like, what do I have to offer besides making people films? But the reality is, like, the shared experience is what everyone has to offer.
Exactly.
Movies, especially horror films, are always better off shared.
Absolutely. Well, that, I think, is a perfect place to end, because what beautiful advice you've given, and you stated it so well. And if your mic were not attached to a mic stand and listeners covered in a white sock, then you would have been able to drop the mic right then, and that would have been really great.
Makeshift pop shield.
Let me tell everybody, don't ever drop mics. Mics are very expensive, and you should never drop them.
Don't do it. Some people do that at summer camp, actually.
Yeah.
At the end of talent show performances, and every time, just everyone working in technical just goes, oh.
Yes, I was a judge during an act, and I had to take off my judge hat and put back on my summer camp manager hat, because my heart was breaking into a million pieces when those mics were dropped.
Yeah. It's gutting.
It's gutting. Well, thank you very much, Dan. I hope you enjoyed being on the other side of the microphone, as it were.
I did very much. And I enjoyed sharing the podcast with you, which we're going to get to do more in the future.
I cannot wait. It's so enjoyable to be here chatting with you. And I look forward to chatting with so many more creatives in this brilliant industry. So thank you so much for listening.
Hell yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
See you on the next one.
Cheers.